Woo.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone joining us from home. My name is Richard McKim, brand ambassador for Mackmyra Swedish Whisky, and co-landlord with my fellow landlord here, Mickey Plummer, of the Mackmyra Inn, our virtual pub. Usually done on a Friday evening, but given that today is a very special day in the whisky calendar, we decided to do it on a Saturday. And instead of inviting one guest along, we bring three of our whisky friends from around the world. So, Mickey, I don't know if you want to say a quick hello to everyone watching at home.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to a Saturday afternoon session for a change. It's nice to be in the pub on a Saturday afternoon as opposed to a Friday evening. It's nice, and it's great that we managed to see some of our esteemed colleagues from around the world as well. So, good afternoon, gentlemen, and ladies and gentlemen out there as well.
Perfect, great, thanks, Mick. So joining Mick and myself, we've got some very special VIP patrons, because obviously we're in the pub today. So I'll say hello to Chris. Hello, Chris. Where are you joining us from, and who do you represent?
Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Chris Riesbeck. I'm the commercial director at Westland Distillery. I'm based out in this little country off the west coast of England called America. It's a fantastic place. I would certainly encourage you to take a visit and come see us at some point. We're an American single malt distillery at Westland, exclusively producing since 2010. And I'd also like to point out that as a VIP patron, I believe my drink should be half off for the entirety of the session.
Oh, yours is free, mate. It's free. It's 100% off.
Yeah. We'll say it's on the tab, but then we'll let you get away with it, I think, at the end of it. So, and Stephen, same question to you. Hello, and who are you, and who do you represent?
Evening, gents. Yeah, thanks a million for having me on. It's been an awful long time since I've been in a pub, albeit virtually. I think they've been closed down nearly over a year here in Ireland. So absolute pleasure to be on here. My name is Stephen Randles. I'm from Origin Spirits Ireland. We are a premium craft spirit producer specialising in avant-garde single malts. And I'm here today to talk to you about our Currach single malt Irish whiskey, which is the first whiskey in the world to ever have been finished in seaweed charred casks. So lots of fun and interesting conversations on innovation coming up later.
Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to it.
Can I just point out, how posh did that sound? Avant-garde.
It's a classy establishment we're running, Mick. This is the sort of client.
Exactly. We just don't have too many patrons that fling about words like avant-garde, Rich. You know what I mean?
Don't say that. Of course, we have loads of them. Just to be
Richard, it was in your initial email to me. You said this was an avant-garde tasting.
I might have said that. I was trying to bring things, and hopefully not lowering the tone too much now that we've raised the bar that high. Shilton, hello, Shilton. Welcome back. Joining us again. Who are you? Where are you joining us from, and who do you represent?
Hello, everyone. I'm Shilton, Almeida. I work for Paul John Whiskies. I look after the European market. I'm based in London. I come from Goa, where the distillery is based. Trust me, it's not a place I want to be right now, which is in London, but I'm missing home. That's all I can say, where it is the climate, what we're going to talk about later on, hot and humid. But yeah, and good to be back again, Richard and Mickey.
Yeah, good to have you back. I think it'd be nice. It would be nice if the weather was a bit better and we could have done this in the pub garden today, but alas, all stuck inside. So, thanks everyone. So we'll be talking to these guys in turn, sharing a dram and some pub chat. We'll be talking probably 30, 40 minutes each. And as it's a pub chat, we'll see where the conversation goes each time. But we'll start off each segment with a different theme, basically, and sort of explore and investigate how people might be able to find or derive a sense of place along with each theme. So with Chris, we'll be talking and focusing, at least at first, on raw materials. With Stephen, he's alluded to it already, but we'll be talking about innovation. And with Shilton, as he said, we'll be talking about climate and maturation, and again, how people can sort of get a sense of each place from those things. And definitely be some overlap, but we'll start off with each of those. So last thing before we get the first round in, Mick, it's International Whisky Day today. That's the special day.
Certainly is.
You tell us, hello, Ray. You tell us a little bit about what it is, how it was founded.
Absolutely. So first, the idea first came about in 2008, and then it was launched in 2009 in the Northern Netherlands by renowned whiskey writers Hans and Becky Offringer, or otherwise known as the Whiskey Couple. Quite famous within their own rights, quite frankly. But what they wanted to do was they wanted to honour and celebrate a good friend of theirs, basically, and a very famous man within the whiskey and beer industry himself, and that's Michael Jackson. And so they come up with the idea to actually have International Whisky Day on his birthday. So unfortunately, Michael passed away before he could see this. And unfortunately, but one of these good thing about this is International Whisky Day is also used to promote awareness around Parkinson's. So if you know a Parkinson's charity, guys, please dig deep and give to them. It is for a good cause. But yeah, so we're here today to, obviously we'll raise a glass as we go through to Michael as well for his birthday, to say happy birthday. And yeah, that's basically the gist behind International Whisky Day, and to celebrate all things whiskey.
Perfect, great, thanks, Mick. And yeah, as you said, definitely have to raise a glass once we've got some poured and toast Michael on his birthday. So yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a bit thirsty, so I'm sure it's 18:05 somewhere, our usual time for the first round. Let's get the drinks in. Shilton, Steve will say goodbye to you guys for now, and bring Chris in, and yeah, please don't go too far, and we'll speak to you guys shortly. So yeah, Chris, hello.
Guys, how are you?
To the Mackmyra Inn. If you've ever been to a British pub, but this is as close as you can get at the moment. Two questions for you, although I appreciate it's probably relatively early in the morning where you are. So I was going to ask, what have you got in your flask, if anything? But I wonder if you might not have anything at all.
Oh no! I am a man of the people, and I am here to drink whiskey and talk all things whiskey. So I was really lucky. I literally had. It's funny, this bottle just got to me in the last couple of days. It's a new release for us. It's our Currach Edition 1, part of our Outpost range series that's going to be launching globally May 1st of this year. It's a new exploration in barley, and I'll get into some of that a little bit earlier. But first off, guys, obviously a huge cheers to both of you. Super excited to be on and be a part of this, and obviously talk whiskey, and getting into the celebration of whiskey is just one of those things that frankly we're not doing enough of, and the culture of the pub and being able to be with your mates and sit down and really have a drink, like what an awesome thing to be able to do. So cheers to that.
Well, I'll definitely cheers to that, and cheers to Michael.
Cheers to absolutely.
Indeed, yeah. So Westland, I mean, you mentioned a bit about at the beginning in your intro, American single malt, but can you tell people watching at home who might not be familiar with you guys as of yet? I think a lot of the whiskey geeks certainly are. I think if you're a whiskey geek, Westland is a fantastic distillery and operation to follow along with. Really is. But yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about what you guys do, how it was started? What your sort of ethos might be.
I find it fascinating. Like, this is the only industry where calling someone a geek or a nerd is like the greatest term of endearment you can provide to them. You're like, no, that's a good thing. So no, we're Westland. We're an American single malt exclusive distillery in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle, Washington. And we started back in 2010. Our co-founder and master distiller, a guy by the name of Matt Hoffman, sort of recognized that there was an opportunity in the U.S. to make whiskey that not only had perhaps a greater sense of place, but also one that had a reverence for raw materials that we saw as, to a certain degree, lacking as single malt sort of was sort of focused more on Scotch whiskey at the moment. There's this real sort of wonderful opportunity in the U.S. and being in the Pacific Northwest, a place where we grow fantastic malting grade barley, to embrace the tradition of whiskey, which in America is classically bourbon or rye, but to do something that we thought was much more indicative of sort of where we call home.
Oh, very good.
No, definitely. So, Rich, what are you having at the moment? What have you got?
Yeah, good point. I've gone straight in with the Bjork Sav. For anyone that hasn't seen that come out yet, launched I think on the 10th of this month. It's the latest in our seasonal releases, which are some limited editions that come out twice a year. So we've got spring summer release, autumn winter release, and this is the spring of a spring summer release. So birch sap wine cask influence, which you can't get. I've not seen anyone else ever do. That's something sort of quite specific to Sweden and to us. We've had something in the past similar to
birch
focused.
Is birch quite common in Sweden? Is that sort of something like, is that a raw material that you guys have plenty of access to?
Yeah,
it's quite cool. I think in the central belt and the southern part, perhaps more than the harsh north. But it's there everywhere. We've got it in the UK as well. I think it's just all across different types of birch across Europe. Yep. Yeah. And Mickey, what have you got?
So I went for, because we've got Chris on and we're going to talk about raw materials, I thought I'd go for Bjork Sav as well. because it's quite important. Exactly. As you all know, none of this is ever planned. We just go, all right, cool, we'll just have this. And on we start with a cocktail to show people that it's okay to have your whiskey that's not just straight like we're having it currently, But unfortunately, I forgot to turn my ice machine on this morning. I have no ice. So cocktails aren't the window for today, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen. Cocktails are off the menu, so apologies for that. So no, I went for Bjorksav. So that brings us on to, so Chris, we wanted to talk to you about raw materials. So how do you think that they offer, the whiskey drinker a sense of place?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think there's this really compelling narrative right now in the whiskey industry, and I'm sure you guys have heard it as well. Does whiskey have terroir, or is it provenance, or what is that thing? Well, I think I don't want to necessarily get lost in the rabbit hole that is that, but what I do want to talk about more specifically is the idea of raw materials absolutely have a sense of place. Raw materials absolutely have provenance. They have terroir. They have all of those things in significant amounts. And one of the unique things about Westland was this opportunity to say, well, listen, single malt whiskey has classically been made X way. But one of the big things that Matt, and frankly at the founding of Westland, that he was concerned with was we didn't want people to look at Westland and say, oh, well, that's American Scotch. That's the sort of the low-hanging fruit to say, well, you're just going to make a Scottish-styled whiskey, single malt Scottish-styled whiskey here in America, and then sort of put a label on it and say, well, this is American single malt. That really wasn't enough. And in fact, the category of American single malt doesn't even technically exist at a federal level with our own government. And I can talk about that briefly later. But raw materials are not only the source and the inspiration for the flavor of all the whiskeys, but they really allow you to tell a compelling story about how the whiskey is bespoke to your distillery, bespoke to your region. And our Outpost range series, which we're really proud of and just recently won, I think, in the World Whiskey Awards yesterday, was recognized as the sort of brand campaign of the year. It's an opportunity for us to go out and to show people that the bandwidth for whiskey hasn't even remotely been exceeded at this point. The reality is that we are just scratching the surface of not just innovation sort of broadly, but the opportunity to experience raw materials and to understand how they can make a unique whiskey overall.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. Sorry, mate, but what you said, Chris, about not wanting to just be an American Scotch. That is almost, well, you change one of the words for Swedish Scotch. Mick and I say on a lot of the tastings we do, our founders, when they started, we were the first ever single malt distillery in Sweden. And they did tour a few distilleries in Scotland while they were researching how to do everything. But they knew from the outset that they didn't just want to be another, a Scottish style whiskey that just happened to be in a different country, with a different address. I think, one of the first places you can look to create something that has a sense of place, provenance or whatever it might be, is use the materials that you have from your country. It's just I don't think it's strictly needed as a bare minimum across the board, but I think it's a very good place to start. So all of our ingredients, whatever it may be, come from Sweden. And when there was no one, Viking Maltings we use is a maltster near Gothenburg, southwest Sweden, and they were the only people that we could get at the time to sort of malt our barley. But there was nobody peating anything, and we knew we wanted to make peated whiskey from the outset. So we had to start malting and peating our own barley as well, because they didn't want to import it in. It was very important for them, being the first in the country, to make sure that everything was as Swedish as possible. So so we went to great lengths basically to make sure that here we go. And this is one of the very early. I think this probably 2000. We started in '99, so this would be sort of between sort of '99 and 2001, I'd say. But one of our smokers originally, this was in the garden, a different founder's garden, but their neighbours complained about all of the smoke getting into everyone's windows and into on the clothes on their washing lines and things. So it moved to a different founder's garden near the sea. So so fewer people would be upset. This is actually some of the founders here on the right hand side. That's a malting bin, if you will. So there's barley being malted in there, getting ready to be put over into the kiln on the left. So
that is those are great pictures. Those things are really amazing. And I was just going to point out, were the neighbors complaining that they weren't peating enough or malting enough where the clothes didn't smell all the time, or were they upset that it smelled at all? Because I feel like those are terrible neighbors that would never get invited to a barbecue.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Though, isn't it? Obviously, we're quite geeky into that. I mean, we'd love to be around that 24/7, but obviously, there are some strange people in the world that are potentially not into that sort of thing. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's like those annoying neighbours that when you do get some pals on and you have one of those big badass barbecues, like, and they complain that it's too much smoke. They're really complaining because they've not been invited.
Yeah, that's got to be it.
Yeah, one of the best whiskey tours I've ever done, specifically for this reason, was my favourite, and that was Bamore in 2017, where if you do the Craftsman's tour, you get to walk atop the barley, as the malted barley as it's being peated, and you just walk in this room where you can barely see from one wall to the next because of all this peat smoke inside. So if they had been my neighbours, I wouldn't have been. I'd have been sort of climbing over the fence and just trying to blend in maybe and make myself at home in their garden. But raw materials, so you can go further with. I don't know if this sort of qualifies, or to me it does, as raw materials. But you guys look quite a lot at different types of oak that you have growing in your area as well. So what sort of influence can you get there, and how important is that in your production?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I mentioned sort of casually this idea of the outpost range. So within the outpost range, we have 3 whiskeys that'll be a part of it. So Calleri is and forgive me for the shameless plug here, but Calleri obviously is the edition 1 coming out for May around the world. So available in Western Europe, some parts of Asia, Australia, and certainly across North America. Then we have Gariana, which is what you're speaking about specifically, Richard, which is our native species of oak here in the Pacific Northwest that I'll touch on. And in a few years' time, we'll have a release called Solum, which is going to be focused on peat that we've locally harvested here in Washington State that has a completely different profile. So listen, there are years for us to have the conversation about what Solum's going to be, and obviously we're incredibly excited about it. But to touch on your immediate question with Gariana, it's interesting. When you think about the American whiskey industry, broadly speaking, you think of Quercus alba, just good old-fashioned white oak. In fact, it's legally required for most styles of American whiskey to be utilized in the maturation of said whiskey. So when you look at the registration or the regulations for something like bourbon, right, that charred new white American oak, like that is, you can't avoid it. Now, obviously, because, and I mentioned earlier, single malt doesn't exist as a category specifically right now within the U.S. In fact, Westland, when we register it within sort of the federal government, it's registered as just whiskey sort of broadly. And then we've gone ahead and built in those sort of extra specifications. 2016, we actually set up this sort of commission, the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission, that helped write the standard of identity for what American single malt whiskey would be. And it's sitting with the federal government now for approval broadly. So fingers crossed that we'll see something in the next couple of months. That's certainly our ambition. But when it comes to something like Gariana, it was a matter of recognizing, one, that there's a resource here in the Northwest that we could use to make casks. Now, there would be people in specifically the wine industry, they'd used it a bit before, but Gariana, if you've never had it before, has a really rich, big profile. It is, and I forgive me all the time because it's a tasting note that I recognize is much more American-centric, but honestly, it's the perfect expression. It is burnt ends, Kansas City barbecue sauce, Jamaican dark rum, cloves, nutmeg, spice. It is, if white oak Quercus alba is an ice cream shop, right? Waffle cone, vanilla, caramel drizzle, kind of those things. Gary Oak is like walking into a barbecue place that hasn't cleaned their pit in 100 years. And it's just amazing because it's meaty, it's resinous, it's phenolic, it's all those things that you want. But, and this is the huge but to this, is that there wasn't an economy built around it. So this is, and I wanted to kind of mention this because I think it's so critical, is that raw materials and the ability to celebrate local raw materials is one thing, but you have to have an economy built around those things to utilize them. So Gary Oak, for many parts of Oregon, where it's obviously sort of native throughout Oregon and Washington State, it's protected species, so you can't cut it down. So when we acquire Gary Oak or Oregon Oak or Quercus Gariana, when we utilize that stuff, it's stuff that's been brought to us. So it's either standing dead and it's been chopped down, or it's fallen over in a storm. Matt and the team at Westland have broadly had to develop this entire economy. They've had to go out and explain to people, like, we want this stuff, we'll buy it from you. Literally working with like smaller mom and pop lumber mills out of the Pacific Northwest that are planing the stuff, turning it into board footage, and then giving it to really high quality cooperages that exist throughout the sort of West Coast to make some unbelievable casks for us. But again, respect for the raw material comes with an inherent level of understanding. It's not like white oak. White oak, you can kiln dry, you can put distillate into it, and you'll get something out of it. Admittedly, we prefer air-dried oak because of the less aggressive tannic bite that exists. And, barley-based distillate, a lot lighter than a corn-based distillate, it works better. But with Gary Oak, it requires a significantly longer air drying. We're talking, for our white oak project, you're looking from anywhere from 18 to 24 months when we work with just standard white oak air dried. For Gary Oak, you're looking at a minimum 3 years, oftentimes closer to 5, just to break down some of those really big flavors that exist there.
Wow. Yeah. So we use Swedish oak in quite a lot of our whiskies, and we've got a few single casks here and there of it, and that needs to be air dried because of how tannic and resinous it is. But even that's got Swedish oak compared to European oak, from sort of France. A lot more bitterness to it, and again, Europe is far bitter, the oak, compared to Quercus alba, as you said, white oak. But yeah, ours is 24 months or two summer seasons, and then see what happens, basically. So it's not quite as long as 24, maybe in some cases, but yeah, 3 to 5 years. That is incredibly long. You can one can only imagine, Mick, how what that wood must be like to require the time. Yeah.
But the exciting, and I think that the sort of the next step of that is, okay, so you've had this long air drying process, but it's respect for raw material also doesn't mean giving it the sort of hug of death, right? Where you overuse it and then there's no balance, there's no nuance. In the Gary Oak project, or part of the Outpost range, with the Garyana releases, not all of it is Gary Oak matured, because frankly, the flavor is so incredibly deep and heavy that we want to make an interesting balanced whiskey. And thankfully, we've done Gary Oak. We're on edition 6 will be our release of September of this year. So it always comes out roughly in September. Editions 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 have all been entirely different vatings, whether it's, there's some peated distillate in there or non-peated distillate, 5 malt, non-5 malt, whether or not there's new Gary Oak, used Gary Oak. How does Gary Oak show when it's been vatted in with a sherry cask, or how does it show when it's been vatted in with a port pipe? And it's just fascinating to see that. We're going to be 6 editions in. They've just bottled Garyana edition 6, I want to say in the last day or so, at our bottling facility, which is super exciting. I don't think people appreciate how long it takes to get whiskey from the distillery to Australia potentially, but it turns out it's a really long time.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you just saw then, Chris, but Jess Lomas of Single Cask Nation just popped up to say hello. So I thought I'd just highlight that, because I know that you guys get along very well. So hello, Jess.
She might be a bigger fan. Her and Chris, who's just jumped up as well, might be bigger fans of Westland than I am, and I get a paycheck from us.
They're good friends of mine. They've just done the road. We're doing a lot of stuff, and they're forever banging about the good word that is Westland.
That's for sure.
It's an exciting time to be at the distillery. Obviously, we're making real sort of strides, I think, as a single malt distillery, not just I think there's this intention for a new distillery always to be sort of lumped into this idea of, well, you're a craft distillery. I'm still not exactly sure what the hell craft means, right? I think the reality is it's been poorly defined at best. Some people think it means X, some people think it means Y, some say it means Z, but what we're really proud of at Westland is we're hitting our stride. There's no doubt about it. The maturity of the liquid that we're putting out has always been really good, but it's the balance of what I'm seeing coming from us is just mind-blowing. I mean, these Garyana releases, this new Calera release, are showing people that not only can America be a source of inspiration for high-quality single malt, frankly, some of the best being made in the world, but we can do it in a way that is reverential to the Pacific Northwest and really embraces our sense of place.
Yeah. And that's the good thing about, that's what we try to expert Mackmyra as well, is, we want to do everything and we want to embrace the Swedishness of it. So, so with your Garyana, we've got Svensk as part of our core range. Majority of that is matured ex-bourbon, just to get some maturity behind it. Now, like I said, with these variations on more popular Quercuses or oaks for the non-Latin speakers out there. So obviously, Swedish oak is more of a Northern European variety of Quercus robur. So roughly 150 to 200 years in the growing, really harsh conditions up there in Sweden. So it takes on quite a big, strong flavour profile as well. So that's why we only finish 10% of the liquid in Swedish oak. There they are, extremely straight, extremely tall, unusually so, actually. So we only take 10% of that liquid per vatting to mature in the Swedish oak for 18 months. just because it has got that strong flavor profile. You don't want to, you want it in there, but you don't want it to be overwhelming. So what Swedish oak does is it's probably definitely a lot less tannic than you'd get on your Southern European robers. And but it gives you more like a white pepper sort of nuttiness through it. Do you know what I mean? And you definitely get that from the Svenska Eklark.
I don't know if Carl can pull it up, but if Carl can grab a picture of what Quercus Gariana looks like versus the Swedish oak that you guys use, you'll see why Gary oak is such a challenging material to work with, because it literally tends to grow its first limbs like 7 or 8 feet off the ground. So when I'm looking at those trees, I'm like, oh my God, look at all that available board footage. Yeah. When you look at a Gary oak tree and it's like, oh, that's just sort of to there. But
sorry, because there's a reason why, that picture in particular, because I'm sure there'll be some oak forests in Sweden that look a bit more typical, at least, as some of the other European forests might appear. But definitely, Scottish oak, that sounds like the same deal there. And, Mizunara from Japan, very difficult to craft things with. I know that Mizunara is susceptible to some things, but the trees that we saw there, so there's a bit of a story behind Swedish oak, and that's in 1830, give or take a year or two, the Swedish king decided, not enough oak in the country, we need to plant more oak trees to plan for the future, as any good statesperson would do, look a few generations down the line. And so they went on a big sort of oak tree planting binge, bonanza, for want of the proper term for it, and to make the trees and engineer them basically to be suitable for building ships for empire and for war and commerce. They planted rows of oak trees, but then they planted other trees in between, so that it would encourage the oak to grow straight and tall to be able to get the light. So it was by design basically that much of the oak trees look like that. In Sweden,
it's hard to fathom the idea of the Swedish doing something where design is a part of the aesthetic. It's just unfathomable.
Mind-blowing stuff, yeah. But it was only so they started planting things in the 1830s, a decade of planting trees everywhere, and then I think it was 35 years later the first ironclad ships began sailing the seas. I think the French had the first, and then in the American Civil War I think there was one on either side. So 30 years after these trees that require 150 to 200 years to grow and be mature, 30 years in, the technology had begun to become obsolete. But leaves more for us to make casks with. So no complaints here, that's for sure. Oh, is this yours?
Wow.
Yeah, so you can see not a tremendous amount of accessible board footage there.
Wow,
bit of a nightmare.
Yeah. So and then imagine the other restriction then of not being able to sort of access them and just cut them down. Now, obviously, I want to touch on this because this is really important. Part of having a sense of place, part of having a reverence for where you come from and an appreciation for your home is embracing the sustainability component of it. So we actually, as a distillery, twice a year, we go out as a team and we plant Gary oak in Savannah, just south of Tacoma in Washington State, in order to ensure that the resource survives. But what's fascinating is Gary oak grows so slowly that we actually have to go back another time during the year and literally move wild grasses and things away from them, because they'll grow over the top of the sapling and literally kill them. So, and to be clear, this is one of those things where my great-grandchildren will maybe have access to these things. This is not us doing this in the moment of saying 20 years from now, look at all this whole forest that Westland's going to have accessible. That's not the point of it. The point of this is that when you really respect raw materials, you're considerate of the accessibility of those things and, frankly, the survivability of those things long term.
Well, like I said, for us and the trees in Sweden, that takes 150 years. So when we do harvest the trees, or when our coopers in the wood guys harvest the trees, we do actually replant trees in their place as well. Do you know what I mean? Because in the first 10 years, from Rich said, from the 1830s, for the first 10 years, we planted 900,000 trees on a small island in the middle of a lake. So when they would cut down, they would be replaced, etc. as well. So.
Yeah, sustainable. And a quick corporate plug. We want Sustainable Distillery of the year in the Icons of Whiskey Awards in the Rest of the World category.
Yeah, Mackmyra Inn just beat us out for the overall on Thursday's awards for the Icons of Whiskey.
And this is what's so exciting to see, that I think distilleries, and it's interesting to see that distilleries, frankly, from the non-traditional countries of making single malt whiskey, it's this sort of, we'll call it, and if you liken it to the way we think of wine, right? There's old world, there's new world. We're very much Sweden, the US, India, Ireland. Maybe Ireland sort of has an interesting path where it's maybe at the in-between point, but we're really new world kind of producers of this idea of what single malt whiskey can be, and sort of experiencing that. And the sustainability aspect is so critical now. I mean, we're really mindful of the impact that we have on not only the environment, but also the people and the culture that sort of surrounds that geographic area. And, a big part of that is we talk about the outpost ranges, recognizing that, with Currach, our first edition coming up, it's the impact of barley on the agricultural cycles here in the Pacific Northwest. We truly are one of the places where you can grow malting grade barley at an incredibly high level, and you can do really interesting things. Now, the varietals that you need to grow in Western Washington are typically going to be somewhat different than what you would grow in sort of the more classic big ag regions of Eastern Washington, the high desert, Idaho, Montana, the Dakotas, the Great Plains states. But it doesn't make it any less critical for us to understand, how do we respect that material? How do we incorporate it into what we're doing? And also, how do we show people that not all barley that goes into making whiskey needs to be 2-row pale? We laugh, and I say this all the time, but, and forgive me, and join me on a journey while I make a mixed metaphor about beer and whiskey. But effectively, it's this idea of, if you think about a majority of the whiskey being made, single malt whiskey being made broadly around the world right now, the reality is most of it is distilled off of the same base as what could become effectively a lager style beer.
Yep.
It's as simple as that. When Westland started back in 2010, one of the things that Matt did, which is so incredibly advanced and frankly insightful to the potential of what American single malt could be, is he started with what if we sort of thought of the base beer as maybe being a stout, and then distilled the same types of barley that would go into that. So this first experimentation with barley and sort of reverence for raw materials started with literally the very first whiskey we ever released at Westland, which would have just been Westland American Single Malt. And it's now, globally available under our American Oak label. So it's, over time, I think what we've recognized is that we can do even more to support agriculture in the Pacific Northwest by understanding that each of these sort of microclimates that exist are going to grow different varietals of barley. They might not be part of the larger commodity system, but it's getting people to put those things in. And we've been huge supporters of Washington State University and Dr. Steve Jones and the Bread Lab initiatives of recognizing that barley can't just be grown for yield. It has to be grown for flavor. The same for wheat, the same for really any cereal grain, and that we want these things to be delicious. Well, there's, obviously whiskey is a bit more challenging. In a beer, you can turn a beer around, farm to field or farm to glass, let's say 7 days. Realistically, the right yeast, you can do it in 7 days. You can find a way. On the bakery side, you can bake a loaf of bread almost instantaneously, right? A couple of hours and you've got something. On the distilling side, it takes a little bit longer, but we have had to be enormous financial sustainers of this system, because we recognize that unless people are willing to pay farmers a higher amount for these unique varietals of barley, unless you're willing to engage the agricultural academic sort of institutions to say, you should be looking at these things. And to the point at Westland, we are literally fully funding a PhD student at Washington State University to look at flavors in barley.
Fantastic.
I saw that a few months ago, actually. I'm sure I saw, I was on a YouTube binge and just one whiskey video after another, and I'm sure that I saw that pop up. And that's one of the reasons why, when we thought about putting this show together today and putting this, or the pub together today, that we thought, let's get these guys on, just because what you're doing, it's not just you're a world whiskey, for want of a better term, but a world whiskey category distillery, but actually doing some really interesting and progressive things, and a lot of thought going into it. I've told a lot of my friends that have said tune in today, I've said, get ready for some really good information about barley and about farming and agriculture in general from Chris when he joins as well. So talking about flavor, so we use tipple as a barley, but instead of using a distiller's yeast and going for yield, we use something called a Currach, which I'm sure hopefully someone will correct my pronunciation with some phonetics in the comments, but which is a Swedish baker's yeast, and it's used in making sweet doughs, sweet pastries, and cakes and things. So that for us is about generating flavour during that fermentation rather than going for yield as well. So we're definitely on in the same boat with you as looking at flavour rather than mass scale production of things.
So it's interesting you talk about yeast. So we use a Belgian Saison yeast exclusively for all of our fermentation, which is nowhere near the attenuator that sort of the M strain would be, right? So attenuation, the ability to basically convert sugar into alcohol. The M strain of yeast is like in those high 90s. I mean, that thing is a beast. It chews through sugar and turns it into alcohol. That's great. The problem is that it tends to only have a sort of singular flavor, right? It's just going to take what you have and sort of embrace it. When using roasted malt or using some of these unique varietals of malt, having a Belgian Saison style yeast, depending on, and if people aren't super into the beer scene, no worries, I can make this super quick and basic, but effectively, right, Saison yeast, ferment them at a low, cool temperature, you get a lot more of those sort of clove, phenolic kind of notes. Do them at a high temperature, you get tons of esters. Obviously, when you've got roasted malt in your mash, you get a lot of those chocolate coffee flavors. But when those things go unchecked, they can be immensely bitter. So using that Belgian Saison yeast, what happens there is that we end up we put it at a relatively high fermentation temperature. And what we end up getting is loads of esters. So orange peel, sort of cherries zest or cherries, dry cherries, and all those flavors do a nice job at sort of taking those bright, sort of sweet, fruity notes and balancing out some of the bitter notes of dark malt, and you get a much more sort of balanced flavor overall. So that, again, it's funny. You talk to most distilleries, and they'll tell you that raw materials are barrels or our water source. And yes, those are raw materials in the sort of broadest interpretation of the word. But
broadest of senses, really.
Yeah. But I would argue that we've lost sight as an industry, and I say broadly as an industry, that like the first great distiller of single malt whiskey was a farmer to some capacity, right? It was a way to add value to grain, and they had a reverence for what they had grown and the amount of sweat equity that had gone into growing this crop in a field, and they wanted to embrace it. I mean, there's an aspect of that I find so incredibly romantic about whiskey that it's, for some reason, barley has become the least important thing that most people talk about. And I'm glad to see that it's changing. Admittedly, it's been a long time coming, but to see that barley is now arguably at the forefront of what flavor development can be. And I'm incredibly proud of our production team at Westland for being admittedly sort of front and center in that fight and going, commodity agricultural systems, there's nothing wrong with them broadly speaking, but if they keep us from embracing flavor in barley and recognizing that there are opportunities to go significantly deeper in the subject matter, then that's not a good thing. Certainly it's not.
I've been on a distillery tour or two where somebody said 90 to 95% of a whiskey's flavour will come from the cask. And whilst what you said is exactly right, but if they're set up that way, then it is true to them, because if they're setting up their production so that 95% of their flavour does come from the wood, it's not incorrect, but it's only true to what they're doing rather than the one.
They're going to go for a standard barley. Do you know what I mean? They're going to go for like a standard 72-hour fermentation time. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be very much what we would call industry standard. You know, and that's great because that's produced some fantastic liquids down the line, and where we get a lot of our inspiration from to start these journeys. Go, do you know what? That's what that's going to be like. So let's go down this road instead. Let's use a baker's yeast. So we need to do like a 5 to 7 day fermentation period. All right, cool. So what's that going to give us? Well, that's going to give us more like orchard fruits and things like that. Do you know what I mean? That sort of sweetness fruits and things like So that's how we, why we use the cognac at the end of the day, because it's the slower acting yeast. So we have to do a longer fermentation time, and with that, gives us more those fruitier, orchard fruit flavors, which we enjoy, which really works well for Mackmyra.
I think the Svensk as well that you held up there. I usually describe the Swedish oak influence, as having like a cooking effect on those orchard fruit. So our I don't know how much of Mackmyra you've tried, Chris, but in a nutshell, our sort of spirit character would be orchard fruits, as Mickey has said there. Some warm, gentle spices, and then sort of an earthy, herbaceous background to it as well. It's quite a lot of balance throughout. But the Swedish oak influence on it, and the single cask versions that I've had, cook those fruits, so you get sort of the cinnamon and apples. You get apple pie, and you get like baked caramelized pear, that sort of thing as well. So interesting to see, you know, what influence wood can have on the flavors you've already created. So, you know, why not do both? Why not try and create flavor throughout the process and try and go for flavor over yield, and then, you know, experiment with casks after that as well. You know, do both things.
So this is the point, and this is, oh God, you've sort of set me up perfectly. So I'm just going to smash this one home for you. But this is, I personally refer to this as this sort of, it's the waterfall, right? It's what people I think have assumed, historically speaking, is that you can make one new raw material selection and it's like, oh, that's a new thing, and it is, but that's not respect for raw materials. That's just creating a new thing. Respect for raw materials is when in any point of the, let's say the waterfall is barley, water, fermentation, so yeast, oak, time, climate, all right. So there's this sort of this in this line right here, right? Every time you make an impact to a raw material, you need to think about the upward facing implication it has and the downward facing implication, right? So, okay, use barley as an example with Currach. Currach Edition 1 is exclusively made from Alba. Alba is a 6-row varietal. Now, what does 6-row mean? Well, 6-row means, classically speaking, that its starch to protein ratio compared to standard 2-row is inverted, right? 2-row's got a lot of starch, little bit of protein. Great for distilling. Tons of sugars come out of that, easy to ferment. 6-row is the opposite. Way more protein, way less sugars. So obviously you've got to run it a little bit differently. You can ferment it the same way, but you've got to understand that the alcohol that comes out of your wash out of your fermenters is going to be a little bit different. So you're going to have to run your stills differently. So there's this impact in every single decision. And it's probably the most obvious in 5 malt, right? If we were using standard 2-row pale malt, the desire to use a Belgian Saison yeast would be non-existent or just wouldn't be critical to the equation. But it's because we appreciate and respect the raw material above it in the chain that we make an impact to the one that comes next to it. And that it literally falls all the way through to the point where air-dried new white American oak, we fill at 55%. We don't fill at 62.5% because as you fill air-dried oak, or as you fill white oak, classically speaking, the higher the ethanol content, the greater the extraction of tannin. The lower the alcohol content, actually the greater extraction of color, which is great for us, and also the less the impact of the tannic nature of the spirit. And again, we're talking about barley, light style spirit, doesn't need a whole lot of tannin, and we're not releasing. Listen, we are not proponents of the age statement system. The reality is good whiskey is when it's balanced and mature, not when it hits some arbitrary number in the sky.
Perfect.
Yeah, for sure. Totally. I just said thank you very much for that. That was there was a great insight in there for me. I don't know about you, Mick, but there was definitely a couple of things. That high ethanol thing, I didn't know that before.
The least strength thing, that was a new thing for me as well. So thank you very much for that.
I'll be
by all means.
I'm stealing that and using that on tastings and professing to have known that myself the whole time from now on, I'll say. So just anyone that is joining and watching us from home, please comment, let us know how you're getting on. If you have any questions for us as we go throughout the day, let us know what you might be drinking as well as we go. So Chris, we've got a way that we usually close off our Friday night pub sessions with people, and although we've got 2 more patrons to come in, so please, if you're joining from home, don't go anywhere. But I think it's probably time now to ask what your favourite whiskey scenario is in this time and place, because I appreciate it can change, and we could ask you the same question another time and it'd be different. But what's in the glass? Who might you be with, and where are you?
All right, so let's get the corporate response part out of the way, right? Obviously, Westland's in the glass, right?
No, that's one of the things. It doesn't have to be a corporate thing. Both mine and Rich, when we first got asked this, when we introduced it, when our guest flipped it on us, we both just went completely not Mackmyra at all. So it doesn't have to be a corporate thing.
Perfect. All right. So if the good people at Westland and Remy Quantra are listening, it's clearly Westland in the glass. I just want to point out. But if it's everyone else and we're all friends here, I honestly, the whiskey that made me fall in love with whiskey was Springbank. Springbank just changed the world for me when I thought about saying, well, I was a pup. I was in my early 20s. I had been selling fine wine. And when I tasted Springbank, I realized that whiskey was not whiskey. The reality was that the universe, it was as if immediately you're sort of elevated to the cosmos and you go, oh, wow, there's a whole and literally overnight, I changed my entire career path and I've worked in whiskey ever since.
Awesome.
So,
yeah.
But the crowd, what is the crowd? So, okay, couple of people. Richard Dawkins, I think, is just one of these like fascinating personalities that I'd love to sit with and have a drink and just sort of like engage that mind. And then I would have to say it would be people like Nietzsche. I would love to like sit and like listen to Nietzsche talk about whiskey. Nice. Nelson Mandela. I mean, all of these people that have just experienced just great thought revolution in their lifetimes. I would find that just fascinating to sit with them, because I think this is something where my personality and Westland's personality are so well joined. We are not afraid of big ideas. In fact, we embrace them. Listen, there's always a little fear as to what the answer could be, but you need to run into that dark place. And admittedly, you know, that's sort of what American single malt, what the Outpost range, what respecting raw materials is all about. It's doing things that where everyone else is walking, where the path is straight and narrow and well lit and safe. You go, oh no, that dodgy part of the woods looks like a hell of a lot of fun. Let's make a beeline for it.
That is a fantastic answer. I think that's one of the most, I don't know, sort of like large answers we've had from it with the guests that you've got involved in the company you're keeping. So yeah, perfect. And there's a bit of love as well popping up in the comments as well about Springbank from and yeah, Casey you lads on this, but yeah, Springbank, I think for Mick and I, that's a phenomenal whiskey. Very
Springbank does take one of those ones that does have a life reaffirming effect on some people.
Yeah.
And you find a lot of people that come into whiskey, or you know, or even just like started out in the lowlands or the highlands. You know, as soon as they hit a Springbank, or pretty much quite a few, you know, some of the other Campbelltowns that are available as well, because it's such a completely different flavour profile from anywhere else. They hit that, but obviously Springbank probably being the most famous one from the Campbelltown. They hit that and go, wow.
Yeah, it's an eye-opening moment. It really is.
You know, they go and get tattoos, and you know the Springbank Society members, and all that sort of good stuff that goes with it. I'm also one of them. Those people.
Yeah, me too. I remember. Yeah. But I was unable to get hold of the local barley release yesterday. But that's something I'll move on from swiftly.
60,000 other people, Rich. I won't even sweat it. Though. Won't even sweat it.
Perfect. So, Chris, thank you so much for coming to join us. I've been really excited about having you guys come and talk to us and join us at the end. So very grateful for you giving up your time, and I don't think you're about to get up too early, have you, over there? It's
no, not too bad.
Mid late morning, I think, and is it the first time you've worn a shirt on a Saturday morning in a while, or what?
Yeah, but to balance it, I'm not wearing pants, so you're fine.
It's pretty much. Yeah, just pretty much a standard pub day out then, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's a standard Saturday at my house. I don't know what you guys do on the weekends, but
yeah, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
No, honestly, guys, a huge amount of respect. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you having us on. We have an enormous amount of reverence for the work that you guys are doing, and obviously, we are in this incredible moment for world single malt, sort of broadly speaking, and it's a rising tide sort of moment. So obviously, the guys that you're going to have on for the rest of this, we have just an incredible amount of respect for not only what they're doing, but what their ambitions are for the industry as well. And I'm so glad that you guys have created a forum for us to have this. So anything that we can do next time you guys are in the States, first couple of drinks are on us for sure. And obviously we're looking forward to seeing you guys on that side of the ocean as well.
Perfect. It sounds most agreeable, Chris, I think. And and I'll say thank you very much again for coming to join us. It goes both ways. Yeah. Always in Skull.
Cheers, guys.
Enjoy your weekend, Chris. Thank you.
Cheers, Chris. That was excellent. Yeah.
Just good blown by that first interaction there, Rich. Do you know what I mean? So, before we bring Chris in, what was your biggest takeaway from that one?
Yeah, I think we touched on it just at the end there. That the filling level and how ethanol can get more, bring more tannins in, and the lower it might be, the more colour and everything there. That's something that I'm definitely going to look up. And yeah, as I said, pretend I've known it the whole time. I think from now. But that was. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think what they're going to be doing with their Outpost series stuff very similar to what we do. They're trying to keep everything very local. So, where we use Swedish oak, they're going for their local tree. They're, in a couple of years' time, as your man mentioned, that they're also going to look at their local peat. Like we get the peat from the Cadamossen. So I think being able to try some of those whiskies as they become available, I think that's going to be fantastic, Rich.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, I think that there was so much in there. This would be one of the few times I think that I go back and watch something just to take some notes and things. There's been a few examples of it in the past, but that's definitely one for me. So, what do you say we bring Stephen in out from the cold?
Yeah. Okay, so let's not leave him out in the cold any longer. The man's probably getting a bit damp. Hope he's got his umbrella up. Well, he's waiting outside the pub to come in. So let's bring in patron number 2 out the cold and get the man a drink.
Let's do it. Oh, we haven't got an audio there, Stephen. I think we might have you. I think there was some responsible muting that might have been done.
Gents. Good to see you.
Yeah,
Stephen,
great to be at the legendary Mackmyra Inn.
Great intro. Great intro already. But Stephen, honestly, thanks very much for joining us. So, Stephen, what are you drinking? What are you drinking? Let's start off with that.
So I'm double parked. I have the Currach single malt Irish whiskey, Atlantic Kombu seaweed cask finish in one glass. And then Richard kindly sent me a bottle of your beautiful Svenska Ek, the Swedish oak finish. So I've done both side by side to have a little taste of both as we're going through. So I'm really excited to taste that and see the Swedish oak influence coming through. So what are you guys having?
Brilliant. Oh, right. So because we're going to touch a little bit on your Currach, I've gone for another. It's not really a world's first because a Japanese distiller did do it, but no one really heard of that. So I'm going to claim it as a world's first, and that's our green tea cask whiskey.
Stunning.
Yeah. It's phenomenal, and it changes for me every single time I go back to it as well. It's lovely. Rich, what are you on?
I've gone with the single malt whiskey that we've had from Stephen, the Atlantic Kombu seaweed cask. I think you've got your side by side with the Svenska Ek with. This is I poured a dram of this last night and have enjoyed it very much. And our boss Shane has actually, I think, gone out and bought a bottle of it already. I sent him a sample, and so that's one bottle sale that you've had out of this before we've even begun. So not too bad.
It would definitely be more, Rich, because I'll be buying a bottle or two at least.
Fantastic.
It's really good. So tell us a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Stephen Randles from Origin Spirits Ireland. As I mentioned earlier, we're fancy, avant-garde, premium single malt producers from Ireland. And funnily enough, our story doesn't really start with whiskey. So the company was set up in 2013 by an Irishman from Tipperary by the name of Patrick Shelley. And Patrick previously spent about 17 years working for LVMH Moët Hennessy, predominantly on the Moët Hennessy side of things, selling fine champagnes and spirits all over the world. And at the time, he was actually based in Moscow in Russia. And tradition over there in the drinks industry is if you were to cement a business partnership, that wasn't actually fully cemented until you cheers it over glasses of high-end premium vodka in whatever bar or restaurant or nightclub that Patrick would take his clients out to in downtown Moscow. And Patrick, being a whiskey lover from Ireland and a wine lover and a food lover, couldn't get his head around or wrap his head around the vodka category at the time, because vodka at the time, by its very definition, was meant to be tasteless, flavorless, odorless, neutral. So he actually set out on a quest and a vendetta to try and create a vodka that he, a whiskey drinker and a wine lover and food lover, could drink himself, something with character, something with flavor, but not from anything that had been added from the actual distillation from the terroir. So he actually created one of the world's first ever single malt vodkas, Currach single malt vodka. That got a name as being going against the grain when it comes to all things vodka, because it was 4 times copper pot distilled, made from 100% Irish malted barley. And the reason they 4 times copper pot distilled it was they wanted to try and encapsulate as much of that Irish malted barley flavour as they could, while still making a technically neutral spirit. And if any of you have had the luxury or the pleasure of tasting Currach, it's got this beautiful, creamy, biscuity, brioche, chocolate malt, earthy style flavour. But the main thing to say here is it actually has a flavour. It actually has a distinctive taste derived from the base ingredient. So that kind of got a name as being a bit of a renegade, going against the grain in the vodka industry. So what did Patrick do? He created the world's first ever peated vodka, Currach peat cask, single malt vodka. So people were saying to Patrick, Patrick, vodka shouldn't have flavor. What are you doing? And Patrick was saying, no, vodka absolutely 100% should have a distinctive characteristic and flavor derived from its base ingredient. So to kind of show them what's what, Patrick got local peat from a bog in Cork in Ireland, used it to char the inside of virgin American oak casks from the Kelvin cooperage in Kentucky, and then finished our single malt vodka in those casks for 3 to 4 months to create the world's first ever peat cask single malt vodka. First time peat and vodka had ever been put together whatsoever. So a beautiful flavor characteristic coming through from the peat there, a real kind of sweet peat flavor to it. And then at the time, the plan was, let's just be vodka producers. Let's just try to create the best world vodkas that we can possibly can. And we said over our dead body, would we ever do a gin? And then we looked at the gin category. And at the time, again, most of the gin producers weren't doing anything amazing with the base spirit. They were all focusing on their botanicals, and they were creating wonderful, amazing gins, foraging botanicals from all over the world and far-flung places, and putting their lives at risk to get to some of these forests and islands to get their hands on these botanicals to make their gins. But Patrick thought, I've got a really beautiful base spirit here in Currach single malt vodka. What about trying to create a single malt gin and make a gin that, rather than focusing on the botanicals, focuses on the actual base spirit itself, the barley base spirit, that creamy, biscuity, brioche base. So the third product we produced was Ornabrack single malt gin, a 5 times copper pot distilled gin using only 5 botanicals, and each of the botanicals being chosen to lift up and accentuate and enhance that single malt base. And a really beautiful gin with a lot of depth. It was created to be a gin that you could sip neat. You didn't have to mix with a gin and tonic. That actually had that beautiful flavor on entry, and then a beautiful depth and a beautiful character. And as you actually sip that one, it's amazing. It almost unravels like a whiskey. So that's how we actually started out as a company. And I joined the company about 4 years ago and joined in with Patrick. And it's amazing. There was 4 distilleries in Ireland about 10, 15 years ago. There's now 39 functioning distilleries, I believe, on the island of Ireland, with a further 20 being built. So a lot of these distilleries are creating vodka and gin while they're waiting for their whiskey to mature. So everyone kept saying to us, no matter what trade fair we were at anywhere in the world, everyone said, come on, lads, when's the whiskey coming? And we kept saying, no, genuinely, we're not producing whiskey. Our plan is to create the best vodka and gin we possibly can. Unless we can come up with an idea innovative enough that fits in with our portfolio and fits in with what we do. Because as you might have seen, each of our products really does kind of go against the grain, and they would have been world's first at the time in terms of innovation in each of their individual categories. So we looked at the whiskey industry and we said, look, there's nothing that we can do with a rum cask or a sherry cask that hasn't already been done in Scotland or by some of the great other Irish whiskey producers. So we never really focused on trying to create a whiskey. But then we got this mad notion to start playing around with seaweed, and things spiraled from there. And here we are today talking to you about our Currach single malt Irish whiskey, which is created. And here are the guys, the Talty family down in County Clare. So these are the guys we partnered with. They sustainably hand harvest organic Irish kombu kelp seaweed for us. You'll actually see here, you'll notice in the picture, they're cutting the seaweed, so they're actually not pulling it up from the roof. They're actually putting some seaweed back down on the ground so that it'll regrow and regenerate in that area. And that was a big conscious decision for us, is that we wanted to partner with a company who sustainably harvested seaweed, because there is a lot of seaweed harvesters who actually just pull it straight up from the roof, and then no seaweed regrows or regenerates in that area. And obviously, all of the seaweed here on the island of Ireland, we're lucky we've got seaweed in abundance as an island nation. We don't have to grow or farm any of our seaweed, so it's all completely organic seaweed. But yeah, it was basically how it came about was, we had our peated vodka, and we wanted to try and create something in the gin category that would be a world's first. No one had ever done. And we started looking for ideas. We looked at the landscape of Ireland, because we wanted to use as much Irish ingredients as we possibly could. Looked around the landscape, pretty much everything had been done on the Irish landscape in the gin category. So we started looking to our maritime landscape and our maritime terroir. And we looked at seaweed. We were really fascinated by it, but a lot of people were doing it already. So we kind of put that idea to bed. And it was actually at a whiskey festival. Myself and Patrick were just having a sip of whiskey together. And somehow the idea came back to us. We said, remember that idea we had about influencing gin with seaweed? What if we tried to influence whiskey with seaweed? And to be honest, lads, we had no idea how we were possibly going to do this, because I don't know if you've ever picked up seaweed on the beach and it's raw, fishy, pungent, oily state. It's not all that enticing. But we took inspiration from the culinary world here in Ireland, whereby seaweed is used an awful lot in cooking. It's having a renaissance of its own in the culinary world here in Ireland, and I'm sure in the UK as well, where chefs are using it as an ingredient. And what we noticed is seaweed, when it's cooked, is completely different to seaweed in its raw, fishy, pungent, oily state, and it releases a completely different set of taste profiles and aromas. So what we actually decided to do is we said, what if we actually used seaweed as a fuel source to char the virgin American oak casks, or any cask, and then finished our whiskey in that cask? Would it bring those cooked seaweed flavor profiles and aromas into the actual cask? So here you'll see the actual cask. So we actually created a world's first. Oh, sorry. Did you have a question in relation to it?
Oh, no, sorry. No, I just said, wow, basically, that was it. Just very interested in listening to what you have to say about it.
Well, this is actually, we had to come up with a world's first in terms of innovation in relation to how we were going to char the cask. So initially, we had no idea what we were going to do. We were completely naive. We literally got virgin American oak casks, again from the Kelvin Cooperage in Kentucky, stood them straight upright, and planked a rake of seaweed inside of the cask, lit it on fire, and kind of almost like a bonfire style, and hoped that it would influence the cask. But what we found is it was only really charring the bottom half of the cask. We weren't getting a uniform char throughout the entire interior of the cask. So what we actually had to do is we turn the casks on their side. As you'll see, the cask is on a conveyor belt here. And what we do is we put the seaweed in about 5 allotments. And we light each allotment on fire. And then what we do is we put the lid back on the cask and roll the cask along the conveyor belt, so that the cooking and kind of roasting seaweed chars that part of the cask, and that there's a uniform char throughout the entire interior of the cask. And we repeat that process 5 times per cask. So it's a really intricate process. It takes about half an hour per cask, where most casks are charred in about 3 or 4 minutes. And we had no idea if it was going to work. We knew what cooked seaweed tasted like. We knew what single malt Irish whiskey tasted like. We had an idea that if you amalgamated them, that they might work well together. But that first day, that first test cask, when we took that first sip, we were just like, oh my God, these marry so well together. And not only do they marry, but they lift up, accentuate, and elevate each other to a completely different level. So I'd be interested, Richard, what kind of flavors are you getting on the palate when you taste that?
So I haven't got much experience eating seaweed. I've had faux seaweed from Chinese takeaways, which is in the UK just chopped up cabbage, I believe, with a bit of salt on the top. But when I had a nose of this last night, I was taken a bit back to some time I spent in Southeast Asia, and they had some seaweed crisps almost, and it took me straight back to it. So there's definitely something in there with it, but it's savoury, a lot of salinity to it, that's for sure. And then there's a herbal side to it as well. There's not much. It's meaty. There's not a lot of sweetness there. It's a meaty dram for me, very meaty, savoury, salty, and I think speaking for me at least, but Mick, I know in some of the things that he likes, that's our jam, I would say. So
without question, we managed to. We were talking about this in preparation for the show on Friday, and like I said, our boss Shane was like, where can we actually buy this? Yeah. It was also out at Master and Malt. So we did it. I did a quick frantic Google search and found it. I can't remember who the retailer was now. Rich, can you?
I can't remember. Shane might know if he's watching. He might drop a comment in. But
managed to find it there. So I think we might end up buying them out of the Currach, in all fairness, because I my first sip of it was I was warming up for the show, and like I said to you then, there's definitely a great maritime flavour about it. Do you know what I mean? And I really that like Rich said, that is definitely without question, without one of my top 3 jams. Absolutely fantastic, without a doubt. But I love your picture that you had there of roasting the seaweed. We're going to rebut with our own. I personally think it's probably like the best picture in whiskey like ever. So this is David Anderson, our Cooper. That's him heavily toasted or heavily charring one of our 30-litre casks, and and that's, as you can see, set fire to by hand. using scraps of material, because most of our 30-litre casks are actually repurposed 200-litre casks. So we cut them down, and some of the leftover parts we actually use to fire the charring process for the casks, etc. So yeah, when me and Rich did a show with David at the beginning of the year, and that picture come up, I was just like proper like man crush, instant like awesome photo. I love that picture. Yeah.
Mickey tried to crowbar that into almost every show and tasting we've done. That he's specifically there with a 30-litre Swedish oak cask, but even if we've not got a Swedish oak expression or much that's got anything in the recipe from those casks, Mick still tries to get it in. But no complaints on my side, because it's a fantastic picture. As soon as you showed us that picture with the seaweed being charring the inside of your cask, we had a little private message here to make sure that picture ready to queue and to put up. So we're talking about innovation, and that was actually quite insightful for me, because I know you've got these other products in your range. I've only been familiar with the whiskey side of thing, which to me, is innovative, just on its own to make you, an innovative brand, and people are trying to do something different, and trying to differentiate yourself from everyone else. Especially with, I think it's important, very important, with the amount of competition that you're going to have in the coming years, with the amount of distilleries coming up. But what I found very interesting was your other products that you've mentioned that I knew the name of. I've seen on your website, I've seen pop up in shops and things, but I hadn't known, the thoughts and the innovation as well. Again, going all the way back to your inception, innovation from the very start, and doing things that are different. And I'd be very interested to try, a vodka that had flavor to it. I think, Chris touched on the reason why he liked Springbank. It was an epiphany moment for him that, whiskey wasn't just whiskey. For me, it was Lefroy 10 that showed me that, it wasn't just all whatever might be, upside down behind a bar and you get a shot of when you're 18 years old and drink as an American in a saloon might do, and knock it all the way back. So for me, yeah, Lefroy 10, but vodka just tastes like vodka to me, because it's meant to be flavorless, but it has its own taste, and that is of vodka in my limited experience in the category. But yeah, so trying something that's got those, so a bit more meat to it, and other flavors and things involved, and especially, I'll keep going, the peated vodka. That is, I was watching Mick's reaction when you were talking about it, because that again, that is right up our street, that sort of thing. So
I'm already trying to process a cocktail that I'm going to do with it, Rich. But I'm definitely going to buy a bottle of it. I'm already trying to process the cocktail that I'm going to do with it. I might use the vodka in a variation of my Macatini, Rich. Take out the gin and use the vodka with, I don't know, maybe I might try it with Bjork Sav. That would be really different. I'll have a play about with that. But so what I tend to do, Chris, is I tend to put our own twist on more well-known cocktails.
Can I interrupt? Sorry. What he does, Stephen, is he takes a well-known cocktail, he changes an ingredient, he gives it a new name, and claims it as his own invention, which is fine. He's invented it, I guess. Sorry, mate.
Because I'm not very innovative myself when it comes to that, so I just look at go, well, what works? All right, that works. Do you know what? That's quite similar in from our range, so I'll replace that with that. And so what I do for the Macatini, it's a twist on the Vesper Martini, obviously from James Bond. So 3 parts gin, 1 part vodka, 1 part, Coach Americano it would be now, as opposed to Quina Lillet. Shaken, not stirred, obviously. So what I do with that for Mackmyra shows is I do 3 parts of our lab gin, 1 part of our green tea whiskey. I use Lillet Blanc and a dash of Angostura bitters, and that is it is beautiful.
I'm gasping over here, lads.
Honestly,
where's the waiter in this place? I want to get one of these served here.
Stephen, you've got 2 drinks to finish yet. I think you should.
I've got 2 drinks to finish here. Yeah, but no, guys. In terms of innovation, in terms of kind of creating innovative drinks, I suppose sometimes we have to remind ourselves that we're in this business to make money, because both myself and Patrick, at our core and at our heart and at our DNA, we're just really passionate spirit guys, and we're all about trying to create products that we like ourselves. Like, even when it came to Currach, we had no idea, we did no market research as to whether, the world wanted a seaweed influenced whiskey out there on the market. And we knew we liked it. We knew that we liked the idea. And when we tasted it, we were totally enamored by it, and knew that we had a viable product. But we then went and did a little bit of research. And obviously, there's a technical file in Scotland that is quite restricting in terms of what they can and can't do. But you guys came up on our radar, and this is why I was delighted that we were invited on to speak with you guys today, because, the stuff that you guys are doing in terms of innovation, with your, using juniper to actually peat the barley as well, and, your grunted tea and your artificial intelligence whiskey, seeing those releases, going out there into the world, and that they were working, was definitely an inspiration for us that, this might be a viable product. And I think there's definitely a demand for more creative products. You know what I mean? I think where whiskey previously, people were focused on brands. They wanted to be seen to be drinking a certain brand because that's cool. People, as Chris alluded to a lot in his talk there, they're looking for authenticity. They're looking for transparency. They're looking for provenance. What the actual consumer is looking for is changing, but also the consumer is changing. Completely different demographics are being brought in to the spirits industry, and are drinking more spirits than ever before. And they don't want just the same old. They want something new. They want something creative. So I think there's a need, and for companies like ourselves who are kind of pushing the boundaries in terms of what shouldn't be a specific spirit in a specific category. But yeah, I know, and like even your latest release, like, what are you doing with birch sap?
Yeah.
So our partners, Griffin Van, they make a lot of Swedish natural wines. So last year when we did
Yak liquor.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. I look behind me to remind myself. When we did Yak last year, obviously that was they did what was called a Yak wine, which is like a hunting wine, which is a lingonberry and blueberry wine. And we took that, we seasoned Ex Oloroso casks with it, and we finished whiskey in that. Do you know what I mean? Another, a natural wine, and we worked with them again. So they produced the birch sap wine, which is quite available in Sweden, I think in Germany as well. Not so much over here. I don't know. We're not maybe up on the natural wine element in the UK at the moment. If they are, please do let me know, because I'd like to try some different stuff. But yeah, so taking that, that Swedishness again, like you're doing the same, taking that very Irish product that we've got.
Yeah, so that 5-0. Sorry, Mick, go on. Continue.
So you're taking that very, West of Ireland thing that you said, and using that, where you peated. Have you ever thought about maybe, obviously we use our local peat to smoke our peated barley. Have you ever thought about using the seaweed as opposed to peat to smoke barley and doing it that way?
Like, we're in the very humble beginnings at the moment. We're just over a year. I think it was last week we celebrated our first year after the release of Currach whiskey. Right. We'll never say never in terms of what we might do further down the line. It has come across our radar, but obviously we're trying to get our brand up off the ground at the moment. And this is our first release, Currach Single Malt Irish Whiskey, and what you'll see is it's Atlantic Kombu seaweed cask, and it's a brown seaweed variety. We were meant to have 2 further core commercial releases out this year, which got pushed back because of COVID. And what they actually are is they are the exact same single malt Irish whiskey, put into the exact same virgin American oak cask. The only difference being we've used different seaweed varietals to char the cask. So whereby this is a brown seaweed varietal, our upcoming release in June is going to be finished in Wakami seaweed casks, which is a green seaweed varietal. Okay. And then in 2022, a little kind of a release here for everyone listening in, 2022, we're going to be releasing our 3rd core commercial release, which will be finished in Dilisk or Dulce casks, as Chris was saying they call it, up in the Pacific Northwest. And so all the exact same single malt Irish whiskey base, the exact same virgin American oak casks, the only difference is the different seaweed variety. And the taste difference is absolutely phenomenal. Where on the Kombu, you're getting Arabic roast coffee, these real earthy notes, you're getting those umami, savory notes that Richard mentioned there a second ago. The Wakami is completely different. The Wakami is a green seaweed varietal, is way more herbal. There's a lot of tart, a lot of marshmallow, a lot of brininess. And then the Dilisk, or the Dulce, is completely different to those two altogether. It's like real salty, savory. It's almost like the skin on a roast chicken dinner that you'd have in your mother's on a Sunday. That's the kind of flavor characteristic that you get off it.
Please send bottle number 1 to my house. That would be much appreciated. Sign me up.
So we'd love to get to a stage where we have all our core commercial releases out and we can start looking at new innovations. And we're like myself and Patrick, like all we do every day is just talk about new innovations and new creations. So we definitely discussed doing this. It's not on the radar for the near future, but I'd never say never for further down the line, definitely.
Yeah, nice. We've someone in the comments tomorrow, I think it popped up actually while I was talking anyway, but agrees very much on the umami and nuts and some sweet coffee in the one that we have here. I'll be super interested to try whatever next ones you do. And in innovation wise, so you had to work out how you're going to infuse seaweed into these casks, and you had a couple of attempts, as you said. And hello, Charlie, thanks for joining. Turning on its side and then rolling it around. Mick, you poured the grunt tea, the green tea. There's some innovation had to go into making that whiskey too, because the green tea casks exist. I mean, no, they don't. There might be somebody somewhere with their private stash, where they've got some special green tea there, so they put into some, probably inert wood in their basement, maybe, but no one was making it with it.
Yeah. I mean, that was 3.5 years in the R&D phase with Angela and Yuko Ono, a young lady in Sweden that imports Japanese green tea into the Scandi countries, and to celebrate all things that, Angela's very much she loves that world travel, and she's very much into the Japanese green tea sort of thing and that as well, and all those sort of good things. And obviously to celebrate her being inducted into the Whiskey Hall of Fame in 2019, the board turned around and said, what do you want to do? And so she chose this product that had been 3.5 years in the making to release. And that was, what we know now as the Grand Tea. Which
to get
four different kinds of Japanese green tea, which I'll not try and murder the pronunciations of now because I'm terrible at my Japanese. But 4 different types of green tea was made up with neutral grain spirit and Oloroso sherry, and then left to sit in ex-Oloroso casks. And then we took maturing whiskey from a variety of other casks and finished it in those green tea casks, essentially.
And Mick, can I just say that your Mackmyra Inn tea is absolutely outstanding. And I think I was a bit wary. I purchased a bottle and I wasn't sure what to expect. And I think this is what a lot of people might think when they purchase a bottle of Currach. But in fairness to you, the flavor characteristics are absolutely incredible, and it's so democratic. I've shared that or samples from that bottle with so many friends, family, and I'm like, you have to try this green tea whiskey. And I get this real rich, chocolatey and slight herbal style characteristics on the back end, but it's so nice, so democratic. Like when you think green tea finished whiskey, you think of something off the wall. And that's one thing that we had to bear in mind with Currach was, we're creating a seaweed influenced whiskey, but we wanted to create a democratic whiskey. Not only people would come in and try once, but they'd come back to again and again and again. And I can see that was definitely in the mind of Angela when she was creating your Mackmyra Inn, because it's got just so much of those sweet characteristics that just entice you back to the whiskey again and again and again.
Yeah, the innovation side of things before I joined Mackmyra is my perception of innovation at Mackmyra was a big pull for me for not only buying a few bottles before I began, but also something that made me very, very excited when the opportunity to join came up. It was the AI whiskey that sort of really got my attention, just because I thought this, to me, until I'd seen that sort of come out, even though I've tried a few whiskies from different places and things, I just thought it was all its heritage and tradition for me was whiskey in a nutshell. Innovation wasn't something I ever considered much only a few years ago. And then when I saw that come out, I just thought my mind was blown, because you couldn't see. I think there might be places in Scotland and some of the new guys coming online now that are trying to do things differently in their own way. But I just thought, there's no way you'd see a Scottish company, even as much as they might be able or want to do something with AI, feel as though they could, because it's a bit off brand for the heritage and history and tradition, as I've said. So when I saw that, I just thought it was just exciting. And I bought 2 bottles before even trying it, because I just wanted to be part of it. But then when I joined, the green tea whiskey came out about 2 weeks later or so. And when I heard about it coming out, even though I was now on this journey of appreciating and looking for innovation and creativity, I thought, oh my God, is this a step too far? is this a bit too bonkers, a bit too out there? But then when I tried it, the day that I heard about it, I loved it. And I think the first time I tried it was after a tasting had been finished at Milroy's. I was shadowing mine and Mickey's boss, Shane, Milroy's of Soho, and did the tasting. And then Shane brought out a few little samples and said, don't share it on social media. I think enough time's passed now where Shane won't be in trouble with our marketing department. But he said this is something was about to come out. And then at the end, he took everyone's vote. What does everyone prefer? And most of the people in the room, I think 17 of 23, 24 people voted for the green tea. And there'd been some remarkably good whiskies that we'd had that evening. So yes, a green tea was straight out the gate, and everyone enjoyed it very much. And something Mickey was saying about the concoction of making those casks. The reason we used Oloroso sherry with the sort of neutral grain spirit, Swedish neutral grain spirit, to put the green tea in, but obviously, at 95, 96%, that would just eviscerate any flavors that are in that tea, and which are often quite subtle. So it needs to be brought down. I think it's brought down to about 72%. But instead of bringing it down with water, Angela thought, well, we can get a bit more flavor in the mix here, and used, as Mickey said, use Oloroso sherry to water that neutral spirit down. So it was other, as we touched on with Chris, just other ways of trying to infuse flavor in it, rather than, it would have been much cheaper for us to use water. But to use Oloroso sherry cost more money, but it's infusing more flavor into the process, like throughout, from start to finish. So innovation left, right and centre. Some of the things you guys are doing, I just think it's excellent. I mean, the stuff that we've heard about today and I've learned about today, phenomenal stuff. I don't know how we might be doing for time, but I'm hello Charlie. Oh yes, yeah, Charlie.
A big advocate for Irish whiskey.
Big fan of Irish whiskey for sure, yeah. And oh, sorry, Mick.
She's really enjoying the conversation. Thanks, Mackmyra, for hosting the event. Oh, Hammer, thank you very much for it.
There you go.
We talk about whiskey regardless if we were on air or not. So why not put it out there for some other people to join in? So I think that will take us up to the whiskey scenario, Chris. Really. So Stephen, the whiskey scenario, as you heard Chris say, it's what's in the glass, where are you, and who are you with, if anybody?
Yeah, well, I think if you ask me this question,
somebody else.
Oh, sorry, say that again.
Don't feel pressured into being with somebody. My one, I'm always like alone in the cottage in the middle of nowhere with a nice big roaring fire and a big peaty dram and stuff like that. So don't feel you have to be on brand either.
Yeah, well, if you asked me this question a year ago, I would have been quite like Chris. I would have picked some far-flung, exotic place. I would have, hung out with someone like Nelson Mandela, or, someone famous like that I looked up to and admired. But I think after a year of being in lockdown on and off here in Ireland, and for the last, since Christmas, really, we've been restricted to 5 kilometres. The place that I'd love to be in my ideal whiskey scenario at the moment would be to be with my parents and be with my family. There's my aunt owns a pub in this beautiful fishing village on the west coast of Ireland called Castletown Bar. It's called Breen's Lobster Bar. If I can't get down there at the moment, I can't get down and see my family. My sister's in the UK; she can't even fly over and visit the country at the moment. So my ideal whiskey scenario would be, hopefully, with our new Currach Atlantic Bacami release in the summer, down in West Cork. COVID's gone; none of us are wearing masks. We're all sitting in the pub enjoying a whiskey. That'd be my ideal whiskey scenario.
Nice.
Sounds very good. Sounds like a nice place to be. And if anyone wants to get hold of your whiskies and other products, where's a good place? And if anyone joining us from the UK or any further afield, if you can say.
So at Currach Whisky on every social media platform, we'll actually be launching our own online shop from our own website next week. So that'll be launching next week. So you'll be able to actually purchase it directly from us directly. Would be the best place to go.
Awesome.
For all the people from Ireland, Northern Ireland tuning in, you can actually find Mackmyra at Anzac Wines and Spirits.
Very good.
So that's from in the north of Ireland. In Northern Ireland and in Ireland as well, online.
Good stuff. Perfect.
Well, gents, can I just say thanks a million for having us on. We really appreciate you bringing us on. You've been such an inspiration to us in terms of a brand, and what an incredible event I have to say today is to be able to bring together different world whiskies from all over the world and celebrate International Whisky Day. I think this is possibly one of the best celebrations I've ever seen put together for International Whisky Day. So fair play to you guys at Mackmyra putting this together.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much for for giving us your time of a weekend and coming to join us as well. So the gratitude certainly goes both ways. So I can say that. And I'll say Slanjvar and
thank you very much, Patrick, Shelley. Obviously, your partner in crime and boss there, Stephen, as well, for saying thanks to us as well. So good health to yourself, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Wow,
another good one.
Mate, this is getting out of control. What was your favourite takeaway from that? I'm going to say the whole 40 minutes, quite frankly.
The whole thing. I mean, I very much enjoyed the fact that there's now a picture that might, just go toe to toe or be a pound for pound with your favourite one. I think for me, learning about the other products that they do as well. As I said, while we were talking, I didn't know about these other things to that level of detail at all. And I think that for me, it's just made me like them even more, and Stephen as well. But the highlight for me was probably just was talking about the seaweed side of it, and specifically, I would say the like cutting of the seaweed rather than putting up from the roots. That's something I didn't, I'd never considered before. Because
barbers.
Yeah, seaweed barbers, indeed. Yeah.
So you just take, a bit off the top and letting the rest of it regrow.
Short back and sides with some concrete seaweed. Yeah. What about you? Anything that stood out in particular for you?
Like very, very similar to yourself, Rich. A lot of it stood out. Obviously, Stephen, a very knowledgeable guy, loves what he's doing in that as well, which comes across really, really well. So buzzing off his enthusiasm and stuff. But yeah, it was interesting to hear about the peated vodka. I'm already going, right, where can I buy that? What cocktails and stuff like that am I going to make with that already? So hearing about the peated vodka and them doing a world first with that is 100% definite big takeaway. But Rich, I think you should bring in what's Jess saying. Sounds like I'm a really interesting whiskey. I'll have to try and get a dram or two. Jess, honestly, pal, definitely, without question, definitely.
Can recommend it. That is, I went through my dram rather quickly. I think there, and I'm sure I'll see the rest of that bottled off. But I think you're leading on to time for VIP patron number 3. So I think let's get Shilton in and he can settle down in his favourite booth.
Again,
hello again.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you so much for coming to join us again, and thank you for the setup in the background there, because I mentioned at the beginning as we set out that our theme would be around maturation and the climate's impact upon it. So seeing some pictures there of a warehouse is excellent. And I did say this before we warmed up. Anyone at home that might be familiar with this, it reminds me very much of the Microsoft screensaver that used to be the pipes going up and down in 3D. So giving away.
Isn't that like Windows 95 or something like that?
Yeah, it was.
Screensaver for like Windows 95 or something ridiculously old.
Great pictures there. So Shilton. Mick and I know you very well, friend of the brand. We love what Paul John do, and I will say that Shane, our boss, absolutely loves Paul John. He can't drink enough of it, responsibly so, of course.
Obviously.
But for everyone that's joining us from different places around the world, because we are streaming through Westland and Currach's page as well. Anyone that might not know anything much about yourself or Paul John, can you just give us a bit of an introduction into who you are, who Paul John is, and what you guys do?
For sure. I mean, first of all, good to be back in the pub virtually. Can't wait to meet and have a few drinks once we are all allowed back. So I'm Shilton Almeida. I work for Paul John Whiskies, look after the European market based in London. I am from Goa itself, born and brought up in Goa. For people who do not know, Paul John is a distillery based in Goa, just 10 kilometers away from the sea. And the distillery was set up in 2008, which you can see right behind me. 2009, we started distilling, and 2012, we launched the first whiskies. That's Paul P. John, the chairman of the company, who started this along with Michael, our master distiller. So we launched in 2012, and we'll talk a lot about maturation and the climate as we get along today. And that's pretty much, we launched, and we are in 38 countries today worldwide. So we're just expanding and growing. And one of the things, as talking about Shane and yourselves, and we always start talking about maturation and can go on for a long time just to find out a lot about what's the common between you guys and us. It's hey Charlie. So that's that's pretty much about how we started. But yeah, what you guys on to first of all?
Yeah, that's it. That's the big question, isn't it? I've Mickey, what are you having?
So I've actually gone off-brand for the first time this evening. Onto Shilton's brand. So I'm enjoying a wee Paul John Oloroso.
Oh, nice. I'm glad you've gone Oloroso, Mick, because I've gone PX. I've gone Paul John PX, and I did a tasting. Shilton doesn't live too far away from me, so we're both members of the Berkshire Whisky Club. If we've still got Ray in the audience, shout out to Ray who started the club. But yeah, Shilton came along and did a Paul John tasting with us a few months ago. I think it must have been now, Shilton. We had the Oloroso and the PX in there, and I had the Oloroso. I thought that was beautiful, and then the PX for me was just like at the next level again. But then when I've got hold of a couple of bottles here, and I've tried them again in the last few days, and I think the Oloroso, I don't know if it's just time and place and mood or what you've eaten that day and it changes, but the Oloroso edged it for me as well. So for me, I'd say that means that they're both operating on a very similar level and delicious stuff. Shilton, what have you got in your glass?
I've gone off brand as well. I've got two with me right now. So
you have.
I poured it in the glass, and I was nosing, and I was thinking, what you start getting in the glass, and that took me straight away to turn around and pour myself Oloroso as well. So I'm very similar notes and getting into kind of nice comparison between these two, and something which just goes to you get the floral, fruity, you get all this fruity notes, apples in this one. Which I'm like, okay, that's kind of reminds me of the Oloroso. So yeah, I'm on two.
Nice.
Perfect. Why don't we do two, Mick? We limit ourselves to one all the time.
Because we're responsible, that's why.
You could have a small amount of two.
You're quite sure, it's not going to be responsible.
What do you think of the Bjork's have overall? They can be
I love it. I love it.
I've
always been a big fan of the brand. You guys know that. Swain's Rock is my all-time favorite whiskey.
Yeah.
I waited to pour it today. I was like, when this goes live, I'm going to just pour it and romance the whiskey, as I call, and see what I get from it. Oh, this is beautiful. It's nice and sweet on the palate as well, and I get a lot of this fruity notes. I love it.
Well, we do have Oloroso seasoned American oak casks. As part of the recipe for Bjork's have. So that's probably why that would probably be a good side.
That's what took me to the Oloroso, I believe.
Yeah. So awesome. Sorry, Mick, but just before we move on from that, you're talking about there's not just birch sap wine casks that have been in the mix with it, and anyone that's watching that isn't or yet to become very familiar with us and what we do. Quite often, our whiskies will have Angela, our chief nose officer or master blender. Will have relatively complex cask recipes in there. Chris at the very beginning said, age is an arbitrary thing. It's all it means is, and I'm sort of paraphrasing him now, but all it means is that's how old that whiskey is, the youngest bit. It doesn't mean, there's no guarantee of anything that comes with it. So Angela, because we don't use age statements, she can use casks of different sizes and all sorts of different things being put into the mix. We have relatively complex recipes go into it, and anyone that is interested in seeing what they are and the contents, we've got a lot of transparency. If you look at mackmyra.com or .co.uk and look at any particular product, you'll be able to find product sheets. And I say that not for a corporate plug, but just as a whiskey fan, for me, that level of transparency is like, I love being able to talk about it and saying that we're doing that. And from now on, from Bjork's Ave onwards, for all of our seasonal releases, Angela said to you and I, Mick, a few weeks ago, that they'll have the percentages similar to what Compass Box do, so the percentages of what casks. So here we go. So before previously, the top right hand part there, the aromatic profile, all of our previous products will say, the types of casks and quite often the different sizes that have gone into it. But from now on, the middle section here, or sort of lower middle, it actually specifies the percentages of those casks as well. So as before we were transparent enough, we were saying, you know, these are what's going into it. But now we've got that clinical, I don't know, you know, precision basically with it as well, saying what's in there. So yeah,
that openness. Do you know what I mean? That, like, this is what we do. Please, you know, feel free to come and interrogate what we do. So there you go. What have you got on later, Shilton? Have you got a tasting or something?
Yeah, again, the tasting with the club, and that's what Ray was mentioning about.
Fantastic.
So we're talking about casks. The theme was going to be talking about maturation and the effect of climate. I know that Mick's got a thing or two to say on our side of it, because obviously, you know, we're ice, you're fire in terms of climate. I think it'd be fair to say.
That's probably a good analogy of that one, Rich.
Should things? Oh, sorry, but should things be left, you know, to the elements, it would be ice and fire. But there's a couple of things that we do, and there's, you know, you've got your own certain setup. There's something floating about, but I'll sort of pass over to you a little bit and talk about specific, you know, Paul John, you know, what you think about what your climate is like, you know, how that affects the casks that you have maturing.
For sure. I mean, as I said, we are just 10 kilometers away from the sea, and we get this tropical climate. It's hot and humid. So when the distillery was being set up in 2008, Michael, our master distiller, first of all, it's a new place to come up with a whiskey. You do not know there's this risk factor to set up the distillery. And what he did was he came out with this idea of having one warehouse under the ground and one above, just to see that, you know, something will work out. End of the day, you know, something will work out. You're just risking it. Today we have 3 warehouses. There is another one which is coming out, 2 on the ground and 1 underground. This is the one on the ground, and that's Michael there, where our whiskeys are. And the interesting one is the one underground, which has got about 3,500 casks. All the experimental casks that we try, the Olorosos or the new ones coming out, are all in the underground warehouse. We have. The temperatures are not much. The average temperature for us in the warehouse is 23 and 25 degrees. Now, I say average. You know, for us, the winter is 17 degrees. I don't even know why it's called as winter.
Well, no, I was going to say, mate, winter. That sounds like, you know, my Glaswegian summer, Shilton. You know that for a fact. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Oh, that's 17 degrees, maybe, you know, and but the highest it can go is up to 40. As well. Now, that's your underground warehouse. This is a place to be. I mean, trust me, if you ever be to whenever you be to the distillery or the visitor center, this is my favorite place because what you can smell in there, it's closed. You know, there is a little difference between the temperatures. I would say 23 over here underground and 25 above. So there's not much of a difference, but this will be less humid compared to the one over the ground, just because of the salt in the air and there's the humidity all over. So our whiskey is tend to be more minerally in character because of the saltiness in the air. As I was saying, 40% of 40 degrees Celsius will be the highest in the month of May at this time of the year, maybe. And the humidity, which is an average of 60 and 70, it can shoot up to even 95 now this month. Wow. So that's very hot and humid. What happens with that is the extraction rate from the wood is a lot higher than Scotland, maybe, for example, because of the climate. We are about 3 to 4 times faster extraction from the wood. Classic example over here is that's a bottle from the flagships. That's a 5 and a 6 years old whiskey, all natural colors. You know, that's what you get. And we have been talking about this many times, guys. I mean, or Shane, whenever I meet him for the show, about the extraction, what you get from the wood with you guys as well, from Mackmyra, by using a smaller cask.
Yeah.
That's 6 years old. You know, we get a lot. At the same time, we lose a lot as well. The thirsty angels always come for their share. For us, it is 8 to 10% angel share.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. 8 to 10% angel share. Trust me, it is not me who drink it and blame it on the angels. I have been there only once a year. I'll just be there once in a year, and it's been last 1 year I have not been, so it is definitely not me drinking it. So yes, it is 8 to 10% a year.
Shilton, is that on average for like the life of the cask, or is that because, you know, quite often when the first year is can be quite a bit higher, and then things sort of slow down a little bit. So is that an average over the course?
That's an average of the angel share. Again, trust me, there is water in the air because of the humidity. So it can, if it is drier, it can shoot up higher because there's no water in the air. It just goes off dry heat. We are close to the sea, so we are only at 8 to 10. If we're more central of India, then we will have lost more if it is drier. So yes, that's how much we lose. There is the water in the air helps a bit to not just go off on the alcohol, so we lose more whiskey and less water from the cask. But the flavor profile, and I was listening to Chris before as well, as we all heard about Chris, and using the 6-row barley. So we use 100% 6-row barley for our whiskeys as well, which is very high on protein and low on starch. So you get this oily, buttery character in the liquid. I mean, you guys are on the Oloroso now. The Oloroso is 5 years in American oak and 2 years in the Oloroso cask, and that's the color you get. I mean, you can put it next to any sherry bomb, which you find out here, and you can just see there's no difference at all. But that's only for 2 years. Now remember, 2 years, that's 3 times. Do that as 3 times in the year in the cold climate.
Yeah, that Oloroso. I said, I had the Oloroso and the PX in a bit of a side by side a few days ago, and when Mickey and I were speaking to Shane yesterday, and we were talking about your whiskies in particular, and I said that so I've in I don't know, the last sort of 6 to 12 months perhaps, I've started slowly going off of Oloroso, heavily Oloroso influenced whiskies. I don't know if it's because I've just had so much of them that I've just obliterated my palate with them and want to move on, or it's more likely, I think, the case that I've had and own even 2 or 3 full maturation Oloroso sherry bombs, you said a moment ago, that have just become a bit too overcooked, bit too wooded, bit too much of one thing, one dimensional, and I think it's just sort of slowed me down with Oloroso. But your Oloroso is just the perfect balance of that sherry sweetness, but with some meaty parts in the background to it. It's not just a one show thing or one aspect to it. It's nuanced and complex, and it is fantastic.
I mean, same time, we will not. We just came out with this, and we started doing the Oloroso in 2018. So it's pretty much new for us as a type of cask that we use. We have been using American oak all this while, and we use the cask that we have is our ASB is 200 liters. I always say, we do not even know what it will be for 20 years time, and first of all, how much will be left in the cask in 20 years time.
Big fat zero, mate. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to go with big fat zero. But it could be worthwhile doing that to season a cask per se, to then put your new mixed spirit into it for maybe 4 years, and then see what that extraction brings. So literally putting a cask in your hottest warehouse until there's literally no liquid left, which might take, maybe 20, 25 years, then put a new make into it, put it into your underground warehouse, so it's got a bit of a chance of maturation, and seeing what that draws back into it.
Yeah, at the same time, the one more thing which we have to remember is with that hotter climate and with that faster extraction rate, 5 and 6 years is something that we get as a nice and fruity. We do not know. If you look at more years left in that cask, the wood will start dominating. And that's when you will get more of this oaky and woody character. Remember the hot climate. We are still researching on it. Michael is still working and seeing how things turn out to be. So yes, we have got whiskey left from the beginning and just trying to see how it goes. But it will be very interesting to see about will the wood start dominating? Will it get very, very oaky? At the moment, we have about 11 years old whiskey, and so far it is fine. The wood hasn't started dominating, which is still a surprise. There are some casks at the warehouse itself where it will be more than 8 to 10%. We're talking about that, Richard, before. Some which is lost a lot of whiskey out of it. And then you just look at, is it me? Who was it?
Mick, talking about the heat and talking, hearing about what things are like being matured in Goa. We're Sweden. I think most people around the world understand Sweden as a rather quite often cold. More often than not throughout the year place. What happens with us?
Literally the polar opposite. So we have obviously our main warehouse is an underground warehouse as well. So we're 50 meters below the ground in an ex-iron ore mine. What that does give us, though, is it gives us quite stable temperatures, but probably about 15 to 16 degrees less than yours, Shilton, quite frankly. So, because obviously, because of where we are. But what that does give us, though, is like 99% humidity, which is crazy high. But when you've got high humidity, high temperature, so you lose quite a bit of angel share. We tend to retain a lot of angel share because the temperature is not very high, but we tend to lose our ABV that little bit more quicker. Yep. So a 12-year-old whiskey on average in Scotch at cask strength can be in the mid-50s. Ours is more towards the high 40s. So Little Brown Dog, a friend of ours, just bottled a Virgin American Oak at 12 years old, single cask, kept in the Boulder mine, and that comes in at 49.8, Rich?
Yeah, 49.8. I think when they bought the cask, I think it was at 50.1, Mick, wasn't it? And then it just lost a couple of shades off. Yeah,
but look at that colour. That's natural colour. You know what I mean? Cask strength. But that's a 12-year-old. Whereas if you relate that to Scotch, which we all do it because that's the people to go up against at the end of the day. They wouldn't have as much of that colour either.
But that what ABV did you fill the cask in?
63.5.
Okay. So for us as well, we fill it at 63, and just in 5 to 6 years' time, a single cask that we will get, which you will see in the market, is somewhere about 57-58% ABV from 63. So that's what we lose in 5-6 years' time on the ABV. But I know I'm that's quite fascinating to see about your warehouses, but I didn't know it was about 16-17 degrees Celsius in the underground warehouse.
I think Mick said, sorry, Shilton, 16-17 less than yours. It's actually it's between 5 and 7 degrees Celsius.
Okay, yeah. Definitely potentially for you, mate. Big jacket weather.
Oh, here is and just a moment ago we saw a big tower picture. That's the entrance, the mine shaft entrance. Although there is another place you can drive down into the iron ore mines Mick was talking about. But that's Lufsdalen is.
Lufsdalen. We've got 7 warehouses. One of them is our Bodis below ground. We've got the Forest warehouse, which is right next to the distillery. We've got the one on the top of the mountain that we just showed there. We've got a couple of other ones. We've got one on an island. We've actually got one in Germany as well, which is really pretty cool. So ours are quite spaced out. We get obviously a lot of different stuff, but the majority, there's the island one on the archipelago. But obviously the majority and the heart of Mackmyra comes from the Bodis mine. So, we don't hit out with big ABV whiskies. Our magic number, Angela's magic number, is 46.1. So all of our seasonals are 46.1. 2 out of our 4 core are 46.1 in the Svenska and the Currach. The other 2 are a lot lower ABV and stuff like that, but that's because of the reason for having them. But there you go. Look, there's the dunnage down in the bottom of the mine. You can just see how long that goes on for. And
there's 10. Oh, sorry, Mick. Sorry, mate. So I didn't mean to jump in there, but as you said, there's 10 big rooms like that down there. There's like a spice room. There's the ex-bourbon room. Spice room being spice casks, like Oloroso, sherry type casks, or Swedish oak and things like that as well. Yeah.
The ones we use for seasoning, basically. If you want to look at it as a recipe, when we put these recipes together, you got to have a generous bit of seasoning here and there, haven't you, to bring out your flavors, But no, it is good. It is interesting how even you guys in India compare and relate to the guys in Sweden, which a complete polar opposites.
I mean, what's the best thing about this is just like Michael, how he does it, and Angela for you. The vote for us, we don't have an age, and what we prefer, which is what we go for, is a style of whiskey to suit every palate, and different style of whiskeys that we come out with to suit different palates. I mean, you have got different whiskeys, similarly with us as well. So having cask in different locations for a master distiller will give that advantage of picking up to come up with that recipe. And that works out very well. For example, having a bottle from the flagships, let's say edited, the cask over here comes from different parts, from the underground as well as on the ground as well. So to put it together, the master distiller have enough cask and different profiles to come up with that recipe. So I think that really helps for, I do know how even Angela works with different recipes and quite come out with different ideas, just like Michael did for us in India.
Yes.
So that I think works very well for both. I mean, of course, you guys have got a lot more whiskey cask being in there, but we are just starting off. We have got in the Oloroso and the PX, which is out. There is some port wood coming out as well by starting off the
Interesting. Yeah.
No one talking. When did you first try Port John?
Oh, probably, I think a year. Let's say a year ago. I think it was. So I joined Mackmyra February 2020, and I think it was about 2 weeks before I joined. I tried it for the first time, and it was bold. It was Port John Bold. I thought it was great. I really liked that. I really liked that very much. Also, for me, Oloroso and PX just knock it out the park. They're two whiskies that they're dangerous whiskies. I think Mick and I we certainly haven't coined that expression, but we use it quite often when we find something that we could drink, all night and not think much of stopping. Yeah. The warehouses Mick was mentioning, just quickly go back to the Fjordur Lahana, Mick, close enough. Lahana, yeah. So this island one here that's just outside of Stockholm, is it's basically a big rock part of it, and it's underneath it. It was an ex-munitions store, so there were torpedoes stored in there at one point, which I think is just it means absolutely nothing to the maturation of whiskey what was in there before and so many years before. But it's just a cool story. It's something that I'm still a year into this now. I'm still excited about hearing these cool little things that we have. And the mountain warehouse that we saw a quick picture of, Stalin.
Beautiful.
Whereas there's a cafe and bar above it. This turret shaped thing here, and then underneath it is a small warehouse where we have a number of 30-litre casks maturing there that are either owned by private customers, because we sell tens of thousands of 30-litre casks to private owners over the last sort of 15 to 16 years of our existence. And if you want, you can choose to have your cask on top of this mountains. You can go skiing or for a week or weekend, go into that little cafe, have a coffee, and then go downstairs and read your cask a poem or something. Yeah.
There was an Instagram video that the main Mackmyra page of the Swedish Mackmyra Swedish whiskey page posted on Instagram the other week, and I think it was Hakan and some of the other guys from the distillery were actually driving casks in what looked like a JCB basically, from the distillery up to the mountain warehouse, going through the snow and stuff. It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. So that's not the UK page. That's the main Mackmyra Swedish Whiskey Sweden page. It was phenomenal. But no, so my first experience of Port John was I was shopping in Marks and Spencer's. And out there, quite, I wouldn't say very limited, but as supermarkets go, they're fairly limited, but very select in what they choose to have on their shelves. And I saw it. It was the same bottle. It was bold, and I was like, Paul John. All right, seems like a cool dude. Oh, Indian whiskey. What the flying flute is Indian whiskey? Well, that's a decent price. I can't remember what the price was now, to be honest. But I was like, well, that's a decent price. Never heard of it before. I'll give it a go. Pops it in a basket. Gets home that evening, pops like that. Oofed. One of my biggest whiskey influences is my Uncle Mike. And I was straight on the phone to him. Mike, have you tried this Paul John gear? do you know about it or anything like that? He's like, nope. I said, get out to Marks and Spencer's and get yourself a bottle, mate. It's dynamite. Honestly, it's brilliant. And that was it. And then obviously, over the past couple of years, me and Shilton have met. We've become good pals and stuff like that through Kenny and just meeting up. There's actually a cocktail floating about in Glasgow at the moment called the Shilton.
Oh, is there?
Is it?
Well, I've tried to name it that. Not many places have taken it up, but I'm trying to push it, mate. I'm trying to push it. So Shilton was up a couple of years ago. We were out having a couple of drinks, watching the football and that, and we went into the Pot Still. And the Pot Still, a very, very famous institution for Glasgow whiskey around the world. People that come to Glasgow from around the world always go for the Pot Still. And Shilton, we know the bar staff, all that sort of good stuff. And Shilton's like, right, so you got Smokehead? Yep. Cool. Tick. You got any ginger ale? Yeah. What fruit have you got? We've got some oranges and that. Brilliant. Bang a double Smokehead in a highball glass over some ice. Top it up with ginger ale and whack a big wedge of orange in it. Some orange peel in the top of that. And the barmaid's like, we don't really do cocktails. She was like, yeah, but it's for us. She's like, okay, not a problem. Not a problem. Bangs it up. Oh, mate, honestly. That whole summer, I drank nothing but them. Nothing but them. Everywhere I went to Glasgow, I explained to them. Now, I changed up the PT whiskey, and I've done it on previous inns and that as well. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, it's basically invented by that man down there. Well, so what's your inspiration from that from Shilton?
I will tell later on about that cocktail as well. But
Right. That story, if I may interject, I'm sure that Shilton's favourite part of it was that there might be a cocktail knocking around with his name on, or the fact that your origin story with Bold. But for me, my favourite part of that, Mick, was the hearing the man who teased Stephen for saying avant-garde has just let everybody know that he does his shopping at Marks and Spencer's. So I think I think an apology might be in order afterwards.
I was on a day out with some posh friends. Yeah, no, you've got a point. You've got a point. So yeah, Stephen. Sorry.
Well, fair enough. But yeah, what do we think about scenario time, Mick?
Yes, I think it is. So Shilton, welcome to the whiskey scenario. So, think in your mind, right?
okay.
What's in your glass, and who are you with, if anybody? Now, you don't have to be with anybody. You don't have to be on brand. It's literally your own personal ideal whiskey scenario.
For sure. I mean, this takes back to the drink what we were talking about, but what you just mentioned before. So what I will really want to be, where I want to be, and what to drink what right now is that drink. Of course, I wouldn't mention about any brand because it can be any lightly peated whiskey into it. And start with ginger ale and sitting on the beach in Goa, just enjoying it with friends. Trust me, I'm missing that so much because it's been more than a year I have not been home. So right now what I want to do is just have that glass topped up with ginger ale and a lightly peated whiskey and just sip it with the friends and just be on the beach. That's all I want to do right now.
Yeah, I think we can all feel you on that one, my friend. I think we can all feel you on that one. And me and Shilton were drinking them in the middle of summer. Granted, it was Glasgow, but it was quite warm. But it's really refreshing. And like I said, everywhere I went that summer, in and around Glasgow, in Edinburgh and stuff like that, that's what I was drinking. I was drinking peated whiskey with ginger ale and a nice slice of orange peel.
Give it a nice twist and try it with a cinnamon stick next time, Mickey, instead of the orange peel.
Okay. So what, for the more winter flavor or in summer?
Summer again, but try it with a cinnamon stick, and it just gives a bit of a twist, get more cinnamony on coming out. But you need some crushed ice on it, so that's when it goes very well. I love it.
I've been, over the past 8 months since we've been in lockdown, as you know, I've been doing a lot more Indian cooking.
I saw that.
I've actually got quite a stock of cassia bark in the kitchen. So I'll maybe replace the cinnamon stick with maybe like a nice strip of cassia bark or something like that.
Well, I've seen that, and trust me, the way it is going, I think when we are all allowed back, when the shows start back, I think we will all be having our own stands, and next to it a small table with some cooked food, home cooked food as well, which goes well. When we're talking about Indian whiskey, let's talk about Indian food next to it as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because obviously you've been doing quite a bit of it in that as well.
Exactly.
We've seen our friend Graham Mackay from Arden American. He's been putting so I think most of us whiskey guys and girls as well. I've been doing a lot more like, well, we do whiskey on our Instagram and our Facebook a lot of the time, and let's do something different. And I think, over lockdown, a lot of us have been just doing stuff with food.
I'll just say quickly, I go back and forth between the whiskey stand and the Indian food stand, just left and right, and I probably neglect many of the other stands that are there as well. Very interested in it. I think that unfortunately, as much as I wish we could have everyone over again, Mick, and just do the whole thing.
Hey, honestly,
three people in order. I'll just say thank you so much, Shilton, for, again, as I said to everybody, I really do mean it, giving up some of your time on the weekend to come and talk to us and celebrate International Whisky Day. We're ever grateful to have you here, and it's just a delight to have you on every time you join, even when you're just watching along and we know you're in the background and writing a comment or two here and there. It's just great to have you part of it, so thank you very much.
Well, we can go, and you guys know that very well, we can just go all day, and especially when you're talking about maturation in casks, that gets me excited as well, so we can just go on and on, without looking at the time. That's how it is. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Definitely our pleasure, Shilton. Definitely our pleasure. And we'll get back in by yourself another time for definite.
Thanks, everyone watching as well from wherever you are. And stay safe, I would say. Stay safe and cheers.
Yeah. Cheers. And hang around if you will, Shilton. Mickey and I will just sort of summarise and close up the show now. But or get the pub ready to close, I should say. And if you can hang around for a wee dram afterwards. Thanks very much, Shilton and Paul John.
Cheers, guys.
Mate, honestly,
what a day
from another great guest.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? It's just it's phenomenal, Rich. The caliber of guests we've had today has been amazing.
I'm not sure
I don't either. She's not done it in the episode, so she thought she'd peep up again. But no,
throwing out the big words for Google, and she doesn't understand. Yeah. But things. What about highlight for you there?
I think, again, I didn't realise that actually Paul John had an underground distillery. An underground warehouse.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was quite new for me. So the fact that we tie in a lot closer than I thought we did. It's just even better, and it's always great to get in amongst some Paul John whiskey again, really.
Not a bad way to start. Yeah, for me, that humidity, what you said about the difference in the humidity, is something I think you never really think about too much when it's in an area away from you, perhaps unless you're studying something or whatever. But how humid it can get, and then how dry it can also be as well, and the effect that's going to have on your whiskey. And the temperature all combined, and that enormous angel share. I mean,
it's crazy, man, isn't it? Crazy, man.
Yeah, it's a shame to lose all that excellent whiskey. But would it be as good as it is if it didn't have that high level of interaction and that angel share was part of it? Who's to say? But
let's not play the what if game, Rich. Do you know what I mean? Because you send that one island to nowhere with the what if game, don't you? Do you know what I mean? What if? Yeah, but what if? No, it is this way for a reason, and we enjoy it this way because that's the way it's made. Let's not what if things, ladies and gentlemen.
It's exactly as it needs to be. I'll say that.
100%. 100%.
So I say thank you to all of the guests, all of our VIP patrons who have joined us. Thank you for everyone else who has joined us from wherever you might be, and given us our pub, your patronage for the afternoon. Super grateful for everybody that's followed and watched along, anyone that's commented and got involved, and again, huge thank you to the guys that have come along and their brands as well, and for allowing us to stream through their platforms and their channels as well. Thank you very much to everyone that's been involved putting this whole day together behind the scenes and up on camera. That's something I think we'd very much like to do in the future, Mick. But before we sort of wrap up, I see you're about to lead into something there.
Yeah, just about to say, before we wrap up and say good night or good afternoon, next Friday, we're back to the Mackmyra Inn next Friday for our penultimate Friday night Mackmyra Inn, where we're going to be joined by Neil Murphy of whiskyreviews.net, who's a good pal of mine, and we'll talk all good things whiskey and podcasts and everything that's happening in the world of whiskey with a blogger. So to get, I think, yeah, and then
what else do we have coming up? Because we've got a few things.
We have our first Quart and Bjorksav tasting, Rich. The Thursday after that, and then on the following Friday, our last Friday pub show is with our good friend, well, your good friend and friend of the brand, Claire Wilkins. Wilkins, did I say sorry?
I will just say, I'll jump in quick and just say the core range of Bjorksav one. I think we've got a special guest joining us for that. Do we not?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So we have Ben Bowers, the spirit specialist, will be joining us for that show. So make sure you tune in for that, guys. Ben's a great guy, really informative. We shared a video, posted a video of the review that he did for the Bjorksav. On the 18th of March, we posted that from our social media. So make sure you check that out as well. If not, then just come along and see what Ben has to say about the Bjorksav.
Perfect. Yeah, and anyone that hasn't followed us before, or watching us now through these other channels we're broadcasting through, we're trying to mix things up and make virtual tastings a bit more interesting as well, or have another element to make it an event. So you'll soon see from us a Swedish whiskey and Swedish cheese virtual tasting coming. That's in the pipeline, yet to be announced. Mickey's got something bubbling that Shilton gave us the inspiration for, I think, in a previous inn that we had, a whiskey and cigar pairing evening. And then we've got a whiskey and music night in the works as well. Early days, but it's something that we hope will be coming soon. So check out our mackmyra.co.uk and our social media channels to be able to find that. And I'll say that check out all of the guests and brands we've had on today as well. Please go and check out what they're doing. Hopefully people found some interesting insights there. I know that we certainly did, really did. So check out all of their websites and social media as well, which I'm sure we'll make available in the comments at some point. So last thing I'll just say, it's International Whisky Day, which is to celebrate and honor Michael Jackson, the great and late whiskey writer. So look into that a little bit more and see, if you can support in some way, some Parkinson's charities and see what you can do there as well. But yeah, I think that's about it, Mick. I think let's go off and have a nap before our tastings this evening. We'll sleep off the afternoon.
A bit of dinner, bit of a nap into some more evening. So I'd like to round up by saying happy birthday, Michael. Happy International Whisky Day, everybody. Skål.
Skål.